This recording is going to deal with the abdominal aorta. The abdominal aorta is situated in the diaphragm in the abdominal cavity. It penetrated the diaphragm by way of the aortic orifice or opening. Abdominal aorta starts at L1, which is the first lumbar vertebrae, and terminates at L4, which is the fourth lumbar vertebrae. It will contain visceral and parietal branches. The visceral branches of the abdominal aorta include the celiac axis, celiac trunk, or celiac artery. 3 names, 1 vessel. This is the first visceral branch of the abdominal aorta. The celiac axis has 3 branches. They are the left gastric artery, which supplies the left side of the stomach, which is called the greater curvature. The second branch of the celiac axis is the splenic artery, which supplies the spleen, pancreas, and stomach. And the third branch is the hepatic artery, and some books refer to it as the common hepatic artery, and this artery supplies the liver. Now, the hepatic artery has 3 branches. They are the right gastric artery, and that supplies the right side of the stomach, which is the lesser curvature, the cystic artery that supplies the gallbladder, and the gastroduodenal artery, which supplies the stomach, and the duodenum, which is the first part of the small intestines. Second branch of the abdominal aorta is the superior mesenteric artery. This is a singular artery, and it supplies the entire small intestines and proximal 1/2 of the large intestines. The right and left adrenal arteries, which are also known as the suprarenal arteries, these supply the adrenal glands or suprarenal glands. These are those little glands that sit on top of the kidneys. The right and left renal arteries. These arteries will supply the kidneys. The right and left gonadal arteries will supply the gonads. Now, gonads are gamete or sex cell producing glands. The term gonadal is a general term, and it is not making reference to a male or female. So if we want to be specific as to the gender, then the gonadal arteries in the male will be referred to as the testicular or spermatic arteries, and these will supply the testes. The gonadal arteries in the female are referred to as the ovarian arteries, and these will supply the ovaries. And the last of the visceral branches of the abdominal aorta is the inferior mesenteric artery. This is also a singular artery, and it supplies the distal half of the large intestines. So how are you going to remember the branches of the celiac axis? Here I go again with one of my sayings. Can Louis go straight home? Can for celiac, Louis for left, go gastric, S straight, home hepatic. Okay, so now we know the branches of the abdominal aorta, as well as the celiac axis and the hepatic artery. So now we're going to take and do the arterial flow and the venous return. But we're going to divide the venous return into 2 portions. Those vessels that are going to deal with the digestive system, which is the hepatic portal system, is one, and those that don't is the other. Hepatic portal circulation or portal circulation. The liver is a remarkable organ in the sense that it has a dual blood supply. Oxygenated blood is supplied to the liver by the hepatic artery, and deoxygenated blood is carried to the liver by the portal vein. And once in the liver, arterial blood and venous blood will mix. Hepatic portal circulations carry venous blood from the digestive organ and spleen to the liver. After you eat, the hepatic portal blood is rich in nutrients and have been absorbed from the digestive tract. So the liver acts as a clearinghouse for useful and non-useful products are processed before being released back into the cardiovascular system or stored in the liver for later use. The hepatic portal system terminates in the liver. It does not terminate in the right atrium. Remember that arteries will deliver oxygenated blood. So here we go. We're going to trace blood to the left side of the stomach. Blood will leave the left ventricle of the heart, go into the ascending aorta, into the arch, to the thoracic aorta, abdominal aorta, celiac artery, goes to the left gastric artery, Left gastric artery is going to supply the left side of the stomach. Now the blood is going to come back through the left gastric vein. Left gastric vein is a tributary to the portal vein. The portal vein is going to take that blood into the liver. The liver is going to take what it needs and gets rid of the rest. It's going to come back to the heart via the hepatic vein into the IVC into the right atrium. We're going to take an arterial flow path to the spleen, pancreas, and stomach. Blood leaves the left ventricle of the heart, goes into the ascending aorta, into the arch, goes into the thoracic aorta, to the abdominal aorta, to the celiac artery, to the splenic artery. Splenic artery is going to supply the spleen, stomach, and pancreas. We want to get that deoxygenated blood. It's going to go into the splenic vein, to the portal vein. Portal vein takes that blood to the liver. It comes out of the liver by way of the hepatic vein into the IVC to the right atrium. Now we're going to go to the liver. The left ventricle, ascending aorta, to the arch, to the thoracic aorta, abdominal aorta, to the celiac artery or axis, to the hepatic artery, to the liver. The blood comes out of the liver by way of the hepatic vein into the IVC to the right atrium. Did you notice that we skipped the portal vein? That's because the liver is supplied by the hepatic artery and it goes directly to the liver. So let's now take blood to the right side of the stomach. Blood leaves the left ventricle of the heart, goes into the ascending aorta, to the arch, to the thoracic aorta, abdominal aorta, to the celiac artery, to the hepatic artery, to the right gastric artery. Right gastric artery supplies the right side of the stomach. Blood is going to leave the right side of the stomach by the right gastric vein. It's going to take that blood into the portal vein. The portal vein takes the blood into the liver. Blood leaves the liver by the hepatic vein, goes into the IVC, right on up into the right atrium. Did you see why we needed to use the hepatic artery? It's because the right gastric artery branches from the hepatic. Now we're going to take arterial blood to the stomach and the duodenum. Blood leaves left ventricle, goes into the ascending aorta, to the arch, to the thoracic aorta, into the abdominal aorta, to the celiac artery, to the hepatic artery, to the gastroduodenal artery. That's going to supply the stomach and the duodenum. Blood leaves the stomach and the duodenum by the gastroduodenal vein. It takes the blood into the portal vein and then into the liver. Blood leaves the liver by way of the hepatic vein, takes it into the IVC, into the right atrium. Let's do the arterial flow to the gallbladder. Blood leaves the left ventricle, goes into the ascending, to the arch, thoracic aorta, abdominal aorta, into the celiac axis, to the hepatic artery, to the cystic artery. Cystic artery supplies the gallbladder. Blood leaves the gallbladder by the cystic vein, into the portal vein. Portal vein takes that blood into the liver. Blood leaves the liver by way of the hepatic vein, into the IVC, up to the right atrium. Let's go now to the small intestines and the proximal half of the large intestines. The left ventricle, ascending aorta, to the arch, to the thoracic aorta, abdominal aorta, superior mesenteric. Superior mesenteric artery supplies the small intestines and the proximal one half of the large intestines. Blood leaves the small intestines and proximal half of the large intestines by way of the superior mesenteric vein. That's going to take the blood into the portal vein. Portal vein takes the blood into the liver. Blood leaves the liver by the hepatic vein. The hepatic vein takes the blood into the IVC and into the right atrium. And for the last one, we're going to supply the distal half of the large intestines. Blood leaves the left ventricle of the heart, goes into the ascending aorta, to the arch, to the thoracic aorta, into the abdominal aorta, into the inferior mesenteric artery. Blood will now supply the distal half of the large intestines. Blood leaves the distal half of the large intestines by the inferior mesenteric vein into the splenic vein. Splenic vein delivers that blood into the portal vein, which takes it into the liver. Blood leaves the liver by the hepatic vein. Hepatic vein takes the blood into the inferior vena cava and now into the right atrium. The remaining visceral branches of the abdominal aorta. So we finished the portal system. Now we have to do the venous return for the remaining visceral branches of the abdominal aorta. Remember, this is going to be different. We're not going to take or deal with anything dealing with the liver or the portal vein. So let's trace the blood to the right kidney. Blood leaves the left ventricle, goes into the ascending aorta, to the arch, to the thoracic aorta, to the abdominal aorta, to the right renal artery, to the right kidney. Blood leaves the right kidney by the right renal vein, and that's going to go into the IVC, into the right atrium. Now we'll take the arterial flow to the left kidney. Blood leaves the left ventricle of the heart, goes into the ascending aorta, to the arch. Blood will now go into the thoracic aorta, to the abdominal aorta, to the left renal artery. Left renal artery supplies the left kidney. Blood will leave the left kidney by way of the left renal vein into the IVC and then into the right atrium. We're going to take the arterial flow to the right adrenal or suprarenal gland. Blood leaves the left ventricle, goes into the ascending aorta, to the arch, to the thoracic aorta, to the abdominal aorta, to the right adrenal artery, which will now supply the right adrenal gland. Blood leaves the right adrenal gland and comes out by the right adrenal vein into the IVC, into the right atrium. We're going to trace the arterial flow now to the left adrenal gland. Blood leaves the left ventricle, goes into the ascending aorta, into the arch, to the thoracic aorta, to the abdominal aorta, left adrenal artery supplies the left adrenal gland. Blood will leave the left adrenal gland by way of the left adrenal vein. That will take blood into the left renal vein, into the IVC, to the right atria. We're going to trace the arterial flow to the right testicle. Blood leaves the left ventricle, goes into the ascending aorta, to the arch, to the thoracic aorta, into the abdominal aorta, to the right testicular artery, which is going to supply the right testicle. Blood will leave the right testicle by way of the right testicular vein into the IVC and to the right atrium. We'll trace the arterial flow to the left testicle. Blood will leave the left ventricle of the heart, goes into the ascending, to the arch, to the thoracic aorta, to the abdominal aorta, to the left testicular artery, which will supply the left testicle. Blood will leave the left testicle by the left testicular vein into the left renal vein, into the IVC, and to the right atrium. Remember that the testicular artery and vein may also be referred to as the spermatic artery or vein. Now we're going to trace the arterial flow to the right ovary. Blood will leave the left ventricle of the heart, go into the ascending aorta, into the arch, to the thoracic aorta, abdominal aorta, to the right ovary. Right ovary, blood will leave by way of the right ovarian vein into the IVC and to the right atrium. Now for the left ovary. Blood will leave the left ventricle, go into the ascending aorta, to the arch, to the thoracic aorta, to the abdominal aorta, into the left ovarian artery, which will supply the left ovary. The left ovary has now going to exchange the oxygenated blood for the deoxygenated blood and leave by way of the left ovarian vein into the left renal, into the IVC, and finally into the right atrium. Now for the parietal branches of the abdominal aorta. We have the inferior phrenic arteries. There's one pair, and that supplies the undersurface of the diaphragm. The lumbar arteries, there are 4 pairs. 4 right lumbar arteries and 4 left lumbar arteries, and these are going to supply the abdominal muscles and abdominal wall. The middle sacral artery is a single artery and supplies the sacrum and coccyx. So let's trace the blood flow to the undersurface of the diaphragm. Again, blood leaves the left ventricle of the heart, goes into the ascending aorta, to the arch, to the thoracic aorta, into the abdominal aorta, into the inferior phrenic artery, and that's going to supply the undersurface of the diaphragm. Blood leaves the undersurface of the diaphragm by the inferior phrenic vein, takes that blood into the IVC, and that goes up to the right atrium. Let's supply the abdominal muscles. Blood leaves the left ventricle, goes into the ascending aorta, to the arch, to the thoracic aorta, abdominal aorta, to the lumbar arteries. These lumbar arteries will supply the abdominal muscles and abdominal wall. Blood will leave that abdominal muscles and wall by way of the lumbar veins that will go into the IVC, into the right atrium. Let's supply blood to the sacrum and coccyx now. Blood leaves the left ventricle of the heart, goes into the ascending aorta, to the arch, It will flow into the thoracic aorta, to the abdominal aorta, to the middle sacral artery, which will supply the sacrum and the coccyx. Blood will leave the sacrum and coccyx by way of the middle sacral vein and will flow into the IVC and now into the right atrium. Wow, we have finished the thoracic and the abdominal, and we're almost done. We just got to do the lower extremities, and we're finished.